The sun hung low over the endless Sahara, turning the dunes into waves of molten gold. A deep silence ruled the land, broken only by the whisper of dry wind gliding over ancient bones buried beneath the sand. For centuries, this land had been a graveyard, a place where time itself seemed to stop. But today, something stirred beneath the surface. A tremor, then another. The sand shifted as if something massive was pushing its way up from the depths of forgotten ages. The earth cracked open, and through it rose a shadow, long, scaled, and breathing the hot air of a world it once ruled. The Carcharodontosaurus, the shark-toothed lizard, had awakened. Its head broke the surface first, enormous jaws opening to release a low growl that echoed across the silent desert. Grains of sand cascaded off its powerful frame, revealing reddish scales streaked with black, glinting faintly under the dying sun. Its yellow eyes scanned the horizon, empty, quiet, lifeless. Yet deep inside, instinct whispered one word: hunt. Carcharodontosaurus moved slowly at first, each step shaking the ground. Its tail swung behind like a great serpent, leaving deep scars across the sand. The scent of the wind told stories: dry heat, old bones, and faint traces of water somewhere far to the east. But more than that, it carried a smell that ignited his hunger, the scent of life. He walked toward it, the dunes parting before his massive claws. Every movement was a memory, echoes of an age when he was king, when even Spinosaurus kept its distance from his territory. The heat wrapped around him like fire, yet his body was made for this world, built to endure, to rule. Suddenly, a shadow passed overhead, a flock of ancient birds, startled by his presence, rising into the sky. Carcharodontosaurus lifted his head, watching them vanish, his eyes narrowing. The desert had changed, but he had not. The same strength pulsed in his limbs, the same hunger burned in his chest. He reached a dry riverbed, its cracked surface whispering of water long gone. There he stopped. His nostrils flared, catching something faint but alive, a trembling signal of prey. In the far distance, a small herd of Tyrannosaurus grazed on sparse desert shrubs near a dying pool of water. The predator crouched, his muscles tightening like drawn steel. The sand around him shifted, but his movement was silent, deliberate. The old instincts returned in perfect rhythm. He had hunted before. He would hunt again. The first step was patience. The second, silence. And when the wind turned in his favor, the world would explode into chaos. As the sun began to set, painting the dunes in crimson light, Carcharodontosaurus took one slow breath. The desert around him fell quiet, as if nature itself knew what was about to happen. His massive eyes locked on the nearest Tyrannosaurus, his jaws slowly parting to reveal rows of serrated teeth, sharp as the day he was born. And then, with a thunderous roar that shattered the silence of the Sahara, the Desert King charged. The dying sun burned low, staining the desert in red and gold, a warning painted across the sky. Beneath that fire-colored horizon, the Carcharodontosaurus moved with purpose. Each footfall pressed deep into the sand, leaving marks that seemed carved by time itself. The wind had shifted. It carried the smell of flesh and fear. Ahead, the Tyrannosaurus herd grazed near the last remnants of a desert pool. The creatures lifted their heads often, sniffing the air, uneasy. They felt something, an ancient instinct whispering danger. But the predator was invisible for now, a living shadow crawling across the dunes. Carcharodontosaurus lowered his massive frame, pressing close to the sand. His breath came slow and steady, every muscle in his body coiled with quiet power. He had waited through endless ages to feel this again, the rhythm of a hunt, the pulse of prey beneath the earth. The wind favored him. The time had come. With a burst of raw energy, he lunged forward, a living avalanche tearing across the dunes. The ground trembled beneath his weight. Sand erupted in clouds, blinding the air. The Tyrannosaurus herd scattered in panic, their cries piercing through the storm. The largest of them, a young male, stumbled, losing its balance on the soft slope. The predator saw his chance. He closed the distance with terrifying speed, jaws opening wide enough to engulf half its neck. The bite came with a sound like shattering stone. Dust swirled around them as the two titans struggled. The Tyrannosaurus kicked and twisted, its heavy tail striking the predator's ribs. But the Desert King did not yield. He clamped harder, teeth sinking deep, blood darkening the sand beneath their feet. The air filled with the primal music of survival, roars, hisses, the scrape of claws on rock. And then, silence. The prey fell limp. The hunter stood over it, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The first hunt after awakening was done. The sands of time had not dulled his strength. He was still the ruler of this land. Carcharodontosaurus raised his head and roared, a sound that rolled across the horizon like thunder. It was a declaration, a memory revived. The king has returned. As the night descended, the desert cooled. The stars emerged, bright, endless, watching. Around the fallen prey, the dunes whispered softly in the wind, carrying the scent of victory through the wasteland. He ate slowly, savoring the taste of life renewed. Each bite brought strength back into his limbs. Each drop of blood was power reclaimed. His eyes glowed faintly under the moonlight, reflecting the ghost of a world that once belonged to him. But deep in the distance, another sound echoed. Low, distant, guttural. It wasn't the wind. It was another roar. Carcharodontosaurus froze, his ears twitching. He turned toward the sound, faint but unmistakable. Another predator, a challenger. The night grew darker, the stars sharper. The desert held its breath once again. The king had returned, but so had the rivals who once fought for the same throne. The desert night stretched endlessly, draped in silver light. The moon hung above like a cold eye, watching everything below. The dunes, the bones, the wind, and the lone giant standing among them. Carcharodontosaurus lifted his head slowly, his nostrils widening as he caught the scent again. That faint, unmistakable presence carried by the desert breeze. It wasn't prey. It was power. Somewhere beyond the dunes, another predator moved. The vibrations beneath the sand were heavy and deliberate. Steps of something vast, something that belonged to the same age as him. For a long moment, the world felt smaller, the silence sharper. Then it came, a sound that shattered the calm, a roar, deep, echoing, powerful. The sound rolled across the desert like thunder. Even the stars seemed to shiver at its force. It was not a cry of fear. It was a claim. Somewhere out there, another giant had declared the desert as its domain. Carcharodontosaurus answered. He stepped forward, his chest expanding, and let out his own roar, a sound older than the dunes themselves. The two calls collided in the empty sky, turning the night into a battlefield of sound. Every dune, every stone, carried the echo of dominance. Far away, a shadow moved, massive, heavy, spined. The silhouette appeared briefly on the ridge of a distant dune, half hidden by drifting sand. The faint outline of a long sail cut against the moonlight. Spinosaurus. Once, these two had shared this land, not in peace, but in war. Where rivers met the desert, their battles had written stories in blood and bone. And now, as if time had bent backward, they stood again on the edge of another confrontation. Carcharodontosaurus lowered his head. His breath misted in the cold air. His muscles rippled under the moonlight, his claws carving deep lines into the sand. There was no fear, only memory. He began to move. Each step was slow but deliberate, his massive body swaying with the rhythm of power. Across the distance, the Spinosaurus roared once more, its long jaws snapping at the air, answering the challenge. The two shadows approached, the space between them glowing faintly under the moonlight. Sand lifted around their legs in spirals, carried by the dry wind. The air felt heavy, as if the entire desert was holding its breath. Finally, they stopped, close enough to see each other's eyes. For a few heartbeats, there was silence. The only sound was the whisper of shifting sand and the distant call of a night bird. The Spinosaurus tilted its head, its sail trembling slightly, a sign of irritation. Carcharodontosaurus stood still, tail sweeping slowly behind him like a weapon waiting to strike. Two kings of a dead world, face to face again. Then, without warning, the Spinosaurus lunged, jaws open, claws extended. The desert exploded into chaos. Carcharodontosaurus turned sharply, avoiding the first strike, then countered with a crushing bite that tore through scales. The sound of impact thundered through the night. Sand flew, roars collided. The desert itself trembled beneath their fury. When the moonlight finally dimmed behind drifting clouds, their battle vanished into shadow. Two titans locked in the timeless war of survival.